A few months ago, I made a video teaching people playing Gran Turismo 3 on how to collect prize cards more efficiently. I call it prize car grinding. To recap, you go through a championship and save at the second to last race while having enough points so that you can choose what prize cards you want to get, and every time you don't get the car you want, just reload the save file. For my channel standards, that video received a lot more views than I would have anticipated, currently being one of my top performing videos so far. I'm very grateful to shed more light on this exciting aspect of the game, but unfortunately, it was dated the moment it aired. Now, the act of saving before the last race, that part is still true. The dated part is the serious manipulation aspect in terms of skipping races. There is a way to skip even more races than what I've shown, and it makes use of a mechanic I wasn't familiar with at the time. I wouldn't be so annoyed at this, but 6.5 months before I posted my video, T Kanji uploaded his Ultimate Gran Turismo 3 guide, where part of that video talks more into that very topic. And funnily enough, by the time I found the guide and was watching that section, T Kanji himself posted a comment correcting me on my own. I'm not even kidding. Now, in all fairness, the method I've shown was how I've always done it for years, and chances are after I'm done making this guide, I'll continue using that method the majority of the time. I'll explain later in the video. The reason why I'm making this sequel, even though T Kanji already explained in his long guide, is to provide a singular and commentated version, and to walk through my thinking process, as this is my first time trying this method so that other people don't have to be intimidated by potentially messing it up. At the end, I'll also show you something called Trade Trick, which is a trick I will be implementing more in my future playthroughs. In particular, this event right here. My first guide walked through the Amateur GT All-Stars Championship, and now we got the Professional Edition. This used to be one of my least favorite championships in the game, as the races take a very long time, there's too many long circuits, every race usually starts with the R390 or GT1 in the front, and every prize car won here are most optimally obtained at this championship. Meaning, if I use my old method here, I would have to do the championship 4 times, and most likely 8 races apiece, totaling up to 36 races total.
So I missed!
However, with these new strategies downloaded in my brain, we are going to do this championship in just 5 races, and we won't need to do it 3 more times. And just because I can, we'll be using my favorite car in the game, the Dodge Viper GTSR Team Orica. So let's give it an oil change and get started. First up, we have a race at Laguna Seca, and immediately, I get hit by a surprise. No Le Mans prototype in sight. I should get this out of the way right now, so skip to this time step to continue with the race. The starting lineup of the grid is random, but I've had instances where the starting grid of a race was exactly the same as the previous attempt, and it most often happens as the starting race when you boot up your console. There was one time where I kept trying to reset this race, making sure none of the Le Mans prototypes were in the lead, but after 7 or 8 resets, none of them were any different. This lineup occurred because I decided to train at an NA Sports Professional beforehand on both Apricot Hill and Tokyo Route 246 to get the feel for the physics before I try this one. So you may want to keep this in mind if you're having similar trouble getting the lineup you want. Ultimately though, I have no f***ing idea how RNG works in this game. Anyways, the lineup here includes a Jaguar XJ220, Subaru Impreza LM, Panos GTR1, Toyota Altezza LM, and Ford GT40. Since the lineup is roughly even in terms of performance, we need to keep an eye on the second place finishers of each race. In this case, the GT40 ends up getting second. Next up is Deep Forest. This time, it's the Altezza. We can also see in that race that same GT40 finishes last, because it had to take a pit stop unlike Laguna Seca. Now for Midfield Raceway 2. If you look at the points for each race, the bottom 2 opponents have the most points. This is really good so far, as we need to have at least 11 points ahead of the Jaguar for the final trick to work. It gets even crazier here as this time, the Impreza takes silver. So far, every race has a different result, which is fantastic for us as we'll see later. Now it's time for test course. This is the first race we'll be skipping, and the way we're going to do this is different from last time I made a video on this topic. In my previous guide, I said what you had to do was immediately skip out a race as soon as it starts. This makes it so that the driver in first gets all 10 points. What I didn't realize before making that video was that the points awarded for each racer is dependent on the position they're in before you quit the race. To simplify, if you drive to first place and then quit out, the second place driver will be awarded 6 points, while you'll be awarded 0. The reason why I never knew of this mechanic before is because this is very unrealistic. If the leading driver DNFs, then realistically the racer before would have attained the points the leader would have gotten. That's not the case here. I would have thought Polyphony would put more thought into this detail, but knowing this new mechanic, all we have to do is drive to first place and then quit out so that the Jaguar gets 6 points instead of 10. But before that, let's first save the game, then reduce the downforce to gain a lead faster. And now we move on to Apricot Hill. The lineup has very even points as a result. Remember to bring the downforce back up beforehand. This time, the Jaguar gains second. Now things are becoming clear. Looking at the points at Rome Circuit, I am at 40 points and the XJ220 is at 20. The end goal for me is to have 50 points and him to have 39 or less. If, hypothetically, we use that same points exploit for 3 races before the last one, and the Jaguar gets second every time, he'll get 24 points. What ultimately needs to happen is that the Jaguar gets less than 6 points enough times. So we'll have to be creative with our planning. For now, let's continue on with this race at Rome. The Altezza takes silver this time, but the Jaguar puts up a good fight, so he'll get 4 points. We're going to skip the rest of the races, so now is the time to save. Now, that hypothetical final number gets reduced to 42. Now the creativity begins. We are now going to bully the Jaguar so that it doesn't guarantee second place twice at most. These next 2 races are going to show 2 different ways you can make that happen. At Seattle, we're going to qualify. Race for 2 laps and get pole position. The reason we're qualifying is to make bullying the Jaguar easier. If the Jaguar gets pole position during our second lap, once the race starts, we'll slow down and ram into the Jaguar until it gets below second place. As we can see, however, the Panos gets pole position and it overtakes the XJ220, so we won't need to ram him this time. Would you look at that? The Jaguar only got 4 points. At SSR 11, however, no mercy is shown.
Whoa! Move it! Oh my god!
It's ultimately faster and easier. I just prefer qualifying to gain more appreciation for certain tracks. I know, I'm weird. Going into Grand Valley, the Jaguar now has 31 points. All we need to do now is race to first place, quit, save the game, and collect our prize card the same way last time. This lineup, as I mentioned before, was ultimately really lucky. There was no dominant AI driver to be worried about. If we were in a position where we needed to fight such opponent, we can afford to do the run to first exploit only and skip 3 races if we want an 11-point lead. because no matter what, that driver can afford at most 64 points, while we'll only get 70. To make things easier on yourself, you'll need to do a lot more bullying than what I've shown in this video if you want to reduce the number of races to finish. It can get as low as 1 point per skipped race. It's actually possible to skip 6 races total, but you're going to need a lot of patience and bully even more drivers to guarantee victory. I'd say doing 6 races is a good place to start if you want to use this method more often. Eventually, once you get a better feel of this mechanic, you can reduce the number of races yourself. Now with that said, I'm still partial towards the old method. It's one I've been doing for years, and the benefit of doing it that way is I get more prize credits per race. And I have a healthy relationship with the tracks of this game. I enjoy racing at tracks like Grand Valley or Special Stage Route 11, and every once in a while I'll do long races at those events just because. Now with that said, it's now time to talk about the trade trick. This requires you to have an extra memory card on hand, unless you're playing on emulator, but it can reduce the number of times you'll do this event to collect all the cards you want. Disclaimer on this though, you're going to need lots of money depending on the events. I have tons of cash on hand from just playing a game, but if you don't have enough cash and just want to get the prize cards faster, the European Championship is the best way to do it. Use the same points manipulation to skip the last 2 races and try to win the Gillet Vertigo to sell for 300,000 credits. This championship is probably the most amount of cash you'll need for this trick. 2,335 credits or thereabouts. The prize cards obtained here are a red Subaru WRX, a Dodge Viper GTSR Concept, and 2 LMPs. We first need to ensure that we win either the Impreza or Viper. And I just got 4 GT1s in a row. You know, I get what you're saying, Teen Kaji, but this still doesn't feel good to sit through. I'm happy retaining my beloved PS2. And it shows, as I now got the Subaru. Now go to your garage, make sure that your second memory card is inserted, save on that card, then go back and load your primary card, and continue on that prize card grind. I was going to get the Viper, but decided to stay on the R390 for now. Here's where the trade part of the trick comes in. Go to your garage and click on trade. Load the second card and purchase the Subaru. Head back and save on that second card again. Repeat that process until you get all 4 cars. Be sure the last car you obtain is the most expensive. I got the Viper, I then traded for the 2 other prize cars, saved onto that, loaded the primary one, won the GT1, and bought the remaining 3 vehicles. Now to save the game on the primary card. And there you have it. All 4 prize cards obtained in just 1 half playthrough of a championship. Now the intended purpose of Trade Trick is to purchase upgrade parts for a vehicle, save it onto a second memory card, then buy that same vehicle for dealership price, making the upgrading part much cheaper. So if you want, you can fully upgrade that Subaru before saving on that first round. Then win any of the 3 remaining cars before buying that WRX for the same price shown earlier. I'm just a sucker for stock vehicles, hence why I didn't do that. But this trick is still very useful for avoiding repeat playthroughs of championships like this. Ultimately, I would say Gran Turismo 3 is the most exploit-heavy game in the series. There isn't too many glitches compared to Gran Turismo 2, but there are a lot of developer oversights we can exploit to make our journey in Gran Turismo 3 smoother and more interesting. Stuff like reverse shifting, series manipulation, prize card resetting, trade trick, the wheelie, out of bounds at Monaco, it's all weird stuff. You don't have to use most of these exploits to enjoy the game, however. I still adore GT3 even without knowing most of these tricks. Prize card grinding, however, is something I like to do in this game, as GT3 has alongside Gran Turismo 1, my favorite selection of cars in the series. I just opened the floodgates, didn't I?